My mother blamed me for absorbing my twin in the womb and called me a murderer my entire life. So I haunted her. I was born with 6 fingers on my left hand, and my mother Gloria never let me forget it. She told everyone who would listen that I was supposed to be a twin, but I absorbed my sister in the womb and stole her life. The 6th finger was proof that I was a monster who killed her real baby. The doctor told her that wasn't how it worked, but Gloria didn't care about science. She cared that she was supposed to have 2 daughters and instead got me, who she called a parasite. My dad Richard left when I was 4 because he couldn't stand Gloria's obsession with the twin that never existed. Gloria blamed me for that too. She said if I hadn't eaten my sister, Richard would have stayed for his real daughter. Growing up, Gloria made me wear gloves to hide my hand. She told teachers I was deformed from a birth defect and needed special accommodation to do things one-handed. She never let me swim or do sports where people might see. She introduced me to people as her surviving daughter and would tear up about the one she lost, while I stood right there knowing she meant I killed my twin. When I was 12, Gloria started making me eat at a separate table because she said looking at me during meals made her think about how I consumed my sister. When I was 14, she moved all my stuff to the basement because my room belonged to the daughter she was supposed to have. She kept that room as a shrine with baby clothes and toys for a girl named Lucy who never existed. She'd buy presents every year for Lucy's birthday and leave them in that room. She'd cry and tell me Lucy would have been beautiful and talented and perfect, not a murderer like me. I had to get a job at 15 because Gloria said she wasn't wasting money on someone who stole her real child's future. She'd spend hundreds on Lucy's shrine but wouldn't buy me school supplies. My grandmother Rose tried to intervene once, but Gloria told her I'd threatened to hurt her if she didn't get me things. Rose believed it because why would a mother lie about her own child? Gloria told the whole family I was violent and unstable, probably from absorbing another person's soul. They started avoiding me at gatherings. My Aunt Beth would hold her baby tighter when I walked by. My cousin Andrew wouldn't let his kids near me. When I turned 18, Gloria demanded I pay her back for raising me. She calculated what Lucy's life was worth and said I owed her $200,000 for stealing it. She actually wrote up a payment plan and tried to make me sign it. When I refused, she went to my job at the bookstore and told my manager I was a thief who owed her money. I almost got fired until I explained my mother was unwell. That's when I found Gloria's diary while she was at her grief support group. She went every week to cry about losing Lucy. The diary went back 20 years, from before I was even born. The entries were insane. She'd written about Lucy visiting her in dreams, about feeling Lucy's presence, about Lucy telling her I was evil. But the interesting part was, Gloria had convinced herself Lucy was trying to come back. She believed if she suffered enough, if she grieved enough, Lucy would return somehow. She'd written about signs and messages and waiting for Lucy to manifest. Perfect. I started leaving things around the house that Gloria would think were signs. I'd move Lucy's toys to different positions when Gloria was out. I'd spray the perfume she'd bought for Lucy in hallways. I'd play music boxes in the middle of the night from inside the walls. Gloria started getting excited, telling her grief group that Lucy was finally reaching out. Then I started writing notes in child handwriting and leaving them in Lucy's room. Simple things like, "Why did you let her hurt me?" And "She trapped me," and "I want to come back." Gloria found them and sobbed for hours. She started apologizing to the empty room for not protecting Lucy from me. I escalated from there. I recorded myself whispering "Mommy" in a high voice and played it from hidden speakers when Gloria was alone. I'd call the house phone from burner phones and breathe into it. I'd leave wet footprints from Lucy's room to mine. Gloria became convinced Lucy's spirit was trapped in the house because of me. She brought in a medium who was obviously a scam artist but told Gloria what she wanted to hear for $300. The medium said a dark presence was preventing Lucy from crossing over. Gloria tried to kick me out, but I'd already established tenant rights, and she couldn't legally evict me without cause. The final phase was the reunion. I hired a girl from my theater class named Amy, who looked enough like me to be a sister. I paid Amy $200 cash and made her promise not to tell anyone about this. She counted the money twice, then looked at me with those big worried eyes and asked if I was sure about going through with it. I told her Gloria had it coming and showed Amy the scars on my arms from where Gloria had pinched me hard enough to break skin when I was 10. Amy stopped asking questions after that. We spent 3 hours in my basement room going over every detail. I played the home videos I'd found in Gloria's closet. Old VHS tapes from before I was born where Gloria talked to her pregnant belly about having twin girls. Amy watched Gloria's voice patterns, the way she drew out certain words, the slight lisp on her S sounds. Then Amy practiced in that high, childlike voice, making it sound sweet but sad, innocent but accusing. She got it perfect on the 6th try, too. I felt my stomach twist with something that wasn't quite excitement and wasn't quite fear. I showed Amy the clothes I'd bought to match the ones in Lucy's shrine room. A white dress with pink flowers that Gloria had purchased last year for a child who would have been 20 years old. Amy held up the dress and asked how old Lucy was supposed to be, and I realized Gloria had never decided on an age. She just bought whatever felt right. We settled on making Amy look about 8 years old, young enough to be heartbreaking, but old enough to deliver the message clearly. I set everything up on Friday afternoon while Gloria was at the grocery store. I hid wireless speakers behind the curtains in the hallway, taped one under Lucy's bed, placed another inside the heating vent. I tested each one with my phone, adjusting volumes until the whispers would sound like they came from inside the walls. Amy arrived through the basement window at 6, and I helped her get dressed in Lucy's room while my hands shook so bad I could barely work the buttons. She looked at all the toys and unopened presents and asked how long Gloria had been doing this. I told her 20 years, my whole life, and Amy's face went pale. I positioned her in the closet where she'd have a clear view of the doorway, but stay hidden until the right moment. I gave her a small flashlight to hold behind her back, so when she stepped out, she'd be backlit and glowing. We did one final practice run, and Amy's Lucy voice made the hair on my neck stand up. I heard Gloria's car pull into the driveway at 7:15, right on schedule, and my heart started hammering against my ribs. The grief group members arrived one by one over the next 20 minutes. 6 women who enabled Gloria's delusion every single week. I watched from my hidden camera as they settled into the living room with their tea and tissues, ready for another evening of crying over losses real and imagined. Gloria started the meeting like always, going around the circle asking each woman to share their grief. I waited until it was Gloria's turn, until she started talking about Lucy, and how much she missed her baby girl. That's when I triggered the first speaker. The whisper came through so soft at first that only one woman noticed, her head turning toward the hallway. I increased the volume gradually, letting the word mommy drift through the house like smoke. Gloria stopped talking mid-sentence, her cup freezing halfway to her mouth. The other women heard it too now, all of them going quiet and still. I triggered the second speaker, then the third, layering the whispers until they seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Gloria stood up fast enough to knock over her tea, the hot liquid spreading across the carpet while she stared at the ceiling. One of the grief group women started praying out loud. Another grabbed Gloria's arm like she needed protection. Gloria pulled away and moved toward the stairs, her whole body shaking. I watched her climb each step, the other women following close behind, all of them whispering to each other about miracles and signs. The whispers got louder as they reached the second floor, and I saw Gloria's face change from fear to desperate hope. She walked straight to Lucy's room and pushed open the door. That's when I gave Amy the signal, one quick flash of my phone screen. Amy stepped out of the closet right on cue, the flashlight behind her making her glow in the dim room, her white dress catching the light. Gloria made a sound I'd never heard before, something between a gasp and a sob, and dropped to her knees so hard I heard the impact through the camera. She reached out with both hands, calling Lucy's name over and over. Amy stepped back exactly like we practiced, staying just out of reach, her face blank and sad. The grief group women crowded in the doorway, some crying, some staring with their mouths open. One pulled out her phone and I almost panicked, but she was just recording, capturing Gloria's miracle for proof. Amy started speaking in that perfect childlike voice, asking why Gloria let her get hurt, why Gloria loved the monster more than her real daughter. Gloria's face twisted up in pain, and she swore she always loved Lucy more, that she never forgot, that she'd been waiting and waiting for this moment. I watched my mother completely fall apart, sobbing so hard her whole body shook, and I felt this rush of pure satisfaction flood through me. But right behind it came something else, something cold and sick that made my hands go numb. Amy kept talking, saying exactly what we'd practiced, and Gloria kept sobbing and reaching and begging. The grief group women were crying now too, convinced they were watching a real spiritual visit. I recorded everything on my phone, evidence of my perfect revenge. Amy faded back into the closet, and I killed the lights for just a second, long enough for her to slip out the window onto the roof like we'd planned. When the lights came back on, Lucy was gone and Gloria was screaming. The grief group women rushed to comfort her, but Gloria pushed them away, crawling to the closet and yanking it open, searching for Lucy in the empty space. She pulled out dresses and toys, threw them across the room, called Lucy's name until her voice went hoarse. I watched from my camera and felt absolutely nothing, just this weird blank space where emotions should be. The women finally got Gloria downstairs and called someone, maybe a doctor, I couldn't hear clearly. They stayed with her for hours, taking turns holding her hand while she stared at nothing and cried. I stayed in my basement room, listening to Gloria's breakdown through the walls, and I couldn't sleep at all. I kept replaying Amy's performance, the way Gloria's face looked when she thought Lucy had really come back, the sound she made when Amy disappeared. Around 3 a.m, I heard Gloria go back upstairs to Lucy's room, and she stayed there talking to empty air, apologizing over and over to a daughter who never existed. The next morning, Gloria was still in that room when I went to check on her. She sat in the middle of the floor surrounded by Lucy's things, rocking back and forth, whispering apologies. I said her name 3 times before I realized she couldn't hear me, lost somewhere inside her own head. I called Rose because I didn't know what else to do, and my grandmother showed up in under 2 hours looking more scared than I'd ever seen her. Rose found Gloria exactly where I'd left her, still rocking, still whispering, and Rose's face went white. She tried talking to Gloria, shaking her shoulder gently, but Gloria just kept muttering about Lucy's judgment and how she failed her real daughter. Rose pulled out her phone and called 911, her voice shaking when she told them her daughter was having some kind of breakdown. The paramedics arrived and had to physically lift Gloria onto the stretcher because she wouldn't move on her own. She didn't fight them, didn't even seem to notice them, just kept staring at nothing and moving her lips in silent words. Rose rode with her in the ambulance and I stayed at the house, sitting in the kitchen while my carefully planned revenge turned into something I didn't recognize anymore. Rose came back that evening and sat across from me at the table, really looking at me for the first time in my entire life, seeing me as an actual person instead of the threat Gloria had painted me as. She asked what happened, and I told her a version of the truth, that Gloria's obsession with Lucy had finally eaten her alive from the inside. Rose stared at me for a long time, then said she always knew Gloria's grief wasn't normal, but she never thought it would end like this, with Gloria completely broken and unreachable. I felt something crack inside my chest, all those careful justifications I'd built up starting to crumble, and I couldn't tell if I felt guilty or vindicated or just empty. The hospital waiting room smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. I sat in one of those plastic chairs that's designed to be uncomfortable so people don't stay too long, my left hand shoved deep in my jacket pocket where no one could see the sixth finger. Rose was somewhere down the hall signing papers while doctors poked at Gloria's broken mind and tried to figure out what medication could patch together a woman who'd spent 20 years talking to a daughter that never existed. A nurse with tired eyes and scraped back hair came through the double doors and asked if I wanted to see my mother. I opened my mouth to answer and nothing came out because I genuinely didn't know. Did I want to see Gloria strapped to a bed? Maybe sedated? Definitely not recognizing reality anymore? Did I want to watch her call out for Lucy while doctors took notes on clipboards? The nurse waited for about 10 seconds, then nodded like she understood and went back through the doors. Rose came back an hour later looking 10 years older, her hands shaking as she sat down next to me. She said the doctors were keeping Gloria for at least 72 hours, probably longer, that they were talking about severe psychotic break and inpatient psychiatric treatment, and a whole bunch of other terms that basically meant my mother's brain had snapped in half. Rose signed everything they put in front of her because she was Gloria's next of kin, and I was just the daughter who'd caused all this, even if Rose didn't know that part yet. We drove back to Gloria's house in silence, and Rose went straight to the kitchen to make tea like hot water, and leaves could fix anything. My phone rang at 2 in the morning and Amy's name lit up the screen. I almost didn't answer because I knew what was coming, but I picked up on the fourth ring and heard her crying before she even said hello. She kept saying she couldn't stop seeing Gloria's face when she delivered that final message about Lucy never coming back, about Gloria choosing the monster over her real daughter. Amy asked if my mother really deserved what we did, and I felt this anger spike in my chest, hot and defensive. I started listing everything Gloria had done to me, every meal I ate alone at a separate table, every night I spent in the basement, while Lucy's shrine room stayed perfect upstairs, every time she told family members I was violent and dangerous, and they believed her without question. I told Amy about the $200,000 debt for a life I supposedly stole, about wearing gloves my entire childhood to hide evidence of my crime, about being called a murderer and a parasite by the only parent I had left. Amy listened to all of it without interrupting, and when I finally ran out of words, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said she believed me, that she understood why I did it, but she still couldn't shake this feeling that we broke something that can't ever be fixed. She said Gloria was a person, a damaged, terrible person, but still a person, and now she was shattered in a hospital bed calling out for a ghost. Amy said she needed space from me and hung up before I could argue. I sat in my basement room staring at my phone and feeling the walls close in a little tighter. Rose started going through Gloria's stuff the next day, sorting bills and paperwork and trying to figure out what needed to be paid. I heard her moving around upstairs, opening drawers and closets, and I knew it was only a matter of time before she found everything. It happened around noon when I was making a sandwich in the kitchen. Rose came down from Lucy's room holding Gloria's diary in one hand and one of my childlike notes in the other, her face showing this mix of betrayal and confusion that made my stomach drop. She set both items on the kitchen table side by side, and I could see my handwriting on the note even from across the room, could see how obvious it was that the same person wrote both. Rose asked very quietly how I could do this to my own mother, and I still couldn't find any words that would make sense. She'd also found the speakers I'd hidden in the walls, the recordings on my laptop, the perfume bottles I'd been using to spray Lucy's scent through the house. Rose had laid it all out like evidence at a crime scene, and now she was looking at me like I was someone she didn't recognize. I sat down at the table and told Rose everything. Not the sanitized version I'd given Amy, but the real story of growing up with Gloria. I told her about being 4 years old and understanding that my mother blamed me for existing, about the gloves I had to wear even in summer, about teachers who thought I was deformed and kids who avoided me because their parents said I was wrong somehow. I told her about moving to the basement at 14 and watching Gloria buy presents for Lucy every single birthday while I got nothing. I told her about the shrine room that should have been mine, about eating alone while Gloria stared at me like I was something that crawled out of a drain. I told her about Rose herself believing Gloria's lies, about the whole family treating me like a threat, about having no one because my mother had poisoned every relationship before it could start. Rose cried while I talked, tears running down her face and dripping onto Gloria's diary. When I finished, she said she'd known Gloria was harsh, but she never understood how bad it really was, that she should have looked closer and asked more questions and not just believed everything Gloria said. Then Rose said she believed me now, but what I did to Gloria was still cruel, that two wrongs don't make a right or whatever people say when they want you to feel guilty. I realized she was right even though I didn't want to admit it, that breaking Gloria hadn't healed anything inside me, had just added this heavy weight of guilt on top of all the existing pain. A week later, Rose asked if I wanted to visit Gloria at the psychiatric facility. I said yes, even though everything in me wanted to say no, because I needed to see what I'd done, Needed to face it instead of hiding in the basement like always. The facility was cleaner than I expected, with white walls and quiet hallways and nurses who smiled like they meant it. They brought us to a visiting room with big windows and comfortable chairs, nothing like the prison I'd imagined. Gloria sat in one of those chairs looking small and medicated, her eyes unfocused and her hands folded in her lap. When she saw me, she started crying and reached out, calling me Lucy and grabbing at my left hand like she wanted to see the sixth finger. I let her take my hand and she held it up to the light, examining the extra finger like it was proof of something. The nurse standing nearby explained that Gloria's delusion had shifted in an interesting way, that now she believed I was Lucy, and the monster daughter had finally died. Gloria kept crying and saying she was sorry for letting the monster hurt me, sorry for not protecting me, sorry for everything. Rose held my other hand as we sat there, and I accepted apologies meant for a sister who never existed. When we left, Gloria was still crying and calling after Lucy, asking me not to leave her again. Rose and I walked to the car in silence, and I felt like I was underwater, like I couldn't breathe right, like something was pressing on my chest and wouldn't let up. I moved out of Gloria's house 2 weeks later using money I'd saved from the bookstore. The apartment was tiny, just a studio with a bathroom and a kitchen area that was basically a hot plate and a mini fridge, but it had windows that actually opened and it was mine. Rose helped me pack my stuff from the basement, which didn't take long because I'd never been allowed to accumulate much. Then we went upstairs to Lucy's shrine room and Rose asked if I wanted to help dismantle it. We spent 3 hours taking down decorations and folding clothes and packing toys into boxes for charity. Rose kept some items in a separate box for Gloria in case she ever recovered enough to want them, but we both knew the woman who'd created that shrine was gone forever. Every toy I packed felt like evidence of my childhood disappearing, proof that this nightmare had actually happened. Before we left, I took one photo of the empty room with my phone, needing something to prove it had been real, that I hadn't imagined 20 years of abuse. The room looked so small and normal without all of Lucy's things filling it, just 4 walls and a window and a closet. Rose locked the door behind us and we loaded everything into her car. Frank noticed something was wrong when I came back to work the following Monday. I must have looked like hell because he pulled me aside during my break and said I seemed like I was struggling. He didn't ask for details, just said everyone has family problems, and sometimes work can be a healthy distraction if you let it. He offered me extra hours and a small raise, said I was good with customers and reliable, and he could use someone like me managing more responsibility. I almost cried right there in the storage room but managed to hold it together until I got home. I threw myself into work after that, organizing inventory and helping customers and doing everything Frank asked plus extra. It felt good to have normal human interactions that didn't involve psychological warfare or childhood trauma, to talk to people about books and make recommendations and not think about Gloria in that facility calling me Lucy. Rose called a month after I moved out and said Gloria's insurance would cover most of her psychiatric care, but could I contribute something toward expenses? The question felt fair and surreal at the same time, this idea that I'd help pay for treatment of a breakdown I'd caused. I said I could do $50 a month and Rose thanked me, said she wasn't judging me, just trying to navigate an impossible situation. I appreciated her honesty even though it hurt. Even though every month when I wrote that check, I thought about Amy's question about whether Gloria really deserved what we did. Rose and I met for coffee every week to talk about Gloria and the family, and she told me she'd explained things to Beth and Andrew, told them the truth about how Gloria had treated me. Some family members started reaching out with awkward apologies, and I accepted them cautiously, knowing these relationships would never be what they should have been, but maybe they could be something. 2 months after Gloria's breakdown, her doctor said she was stable enough for supervised visits. Rose asked if I wanted to see her, and I said yes reluctantly, still not sure why I kept agreeing to these visits. We sat in the same quiet room with the big windows, and Gloria looked smaller than last time, more medicated, more absent. She called me Lucy again the second she saw me, and I didn't correct her because the nurse had explained that contradicting her delusion caused distress. Gloria apologized for letting the monster hurt me, said she should have protected me better, should have loved me more. I sat there accepting apologies meant for a sister who never existed while Rose held my hand, and Gloria cried. The visit lasted 30 minutes, and when we left, Gloria asked Lucy to come back soon, said she missed me so much. In the car, Rose asked if I was okay, and I said I didn't know, which was the most honest answer I could give. I started seeing a therapist named Janet Lewis 3 months after everything happened. She specialized in childhood abuse and complex family trauma, and Rose had recommended her after finding her information online. Janet's office was small and comfortable with soft lighting and a couch that didn't feel like a stereotypical therapy couch. I told her the whole story over 3 sessions, starting with being born with 6 fingers and ending with Gloria in a psychiatric facility believing I was Lucy. I explained the shrine room and the basement and the separate table and the $200,000 debt. I told her about finding the diary and planning the haunting and hiring Amy and watching Gloria break. Janet listened to everything without judgment, but she didn't let me off easy either. She said revenge hadn't erased my trauma, had just added guilt on top of existing pain, and I knew she was right. She said healing required facing what was done to me without becoming like my abuser, and that was going to be harder than any revenge scheme. We started meeting weekly, and slowly, painfully, I began unpacking 20 years of damage while trying not to drown in guilt over what I'd done to Gloria. Rose started calling me every Tuesday morning to ask if I wanted coffee, And I said yes every time because the silence in my apartment felt heavy. We met at a diner near the hospital where they kept Gloria, and Rose ordered pancakes she never finished while I drank black coffee and picked at toast. She told me she'd talked to Beth and Andrew, explained what Gloria had really done to me all those years, and they were having trouble processing it. Beth cried when Rose told her about the separate table in the basement room, said she wished she'd known, but Rose pointed out I'd tried to tell them and nobody listened. Andrew sent me a text message that just said he was sorry, and I stared at it for 20 minutes before typing back that it was okay, even though it wasn't. Rose's honesty about the family's failure felt like medicine that burned going down, but maybe helped anyway. Over the next few weeks, other family members reached out with awkward phone calls and stiff apologies that all sounded the same, like they'd rehearsed what to say to the girl they'd treated like a threat for 18 years. I accepted each apology and said I understood even though I didn't, knowing these relationships were broken in ways that couldn't be fixed, but maybe could be something new. Rose and I kept meeting every Tuesday, and slowly we talked about things besides Gloria, like Rose's garden and my job at the bookstore, and whether I'd ever want to go back to the school. She never pushed me to forgive anyone or pretend the past didn't happen, just sat across from me eating pancakes and treating me like a real person who deserved space at the table. 6 months after Gloria's breakdown, Rose called on a Wednesday instead of Tuesday, and said the doctors thought Gloria could move to a group home. She asked if I wanted to help decide, and I surprised myself by saying yes, that I wanted Gloria somewhere safe, but not alone where she might hurt herself. We drove to 3 different facilities, and the first 2 felt like prisons with fluorescent lights, and the smell of bleach covering something worse. The third place had big windows and plants in the common areas, and the staff members smiled at residents instead of talking over them like they weren't there. Rose asked questions about medication schedules and visitor policies while I walked through the building looking at art therapy projects taped to walls and a garden out back where residents could grow vegetables. A woman showed us Gloria's potential room, small but clean with space for personal items and a view of trees instead of parking lots. Rose looked at me and I nodded, feeling strange about having a say in my mother's life after she'd controlled every aspect of mine. We sat in an office while Rose signed paperwork, and the director explained Gloria would have structure and support, but also independence to make choices within safe limits. When we finished, Rose squeezed my hand in the parking lot and thanked me for coming, said it meant something that I cared enough to help even after everything. I didn't know if I cared or just didn't want Gloria's suffering on my conscience, but I squeezed back anyway. I started visiting Gloria once a month on Sunday afternoons when the group home had the fewest other visitors. She sat in the common area with her hands folded, smaller than I remembered, and when she saw me, her face lit up. She called me Lucy like she always did now, and I didn't correct her, just sat down and asked about her week. She told me about art therapy where she made clay bowls, about a new resident named Margaret who talked too much, about the garden where she planted tomatoes that were starting to grow. She showed me a drawing she'd made of flowers, and I said it was pretty, even though the proportions were off and the colors didn't match anything real. Gloria seemed happy in her delusion, living in a world where her real daughter visited, and the monster was finally gone, and I let her have that because taking it away felt cruel. After 30 minutes, a staff member came to remind Gloria about dinner, and she hugged me goodbye and asked Lucy to come back soon. I drove home feeling hollow, like I'd visited a stranger wearing my mother's face, and called Janet to talk through the complicated mess of emotions. Janet said I got to choose what relationship felt right, that I could visit or not visit, could maintain distance or try to build something new within the limits of Gloria's condition. I chose monthly visits because complete absence felt like proving Gloria right about me being the monster, and even though she'd never know the difference, I would. Frank called me into his office at the bookstore on a Tuesday morning, and I thought I was getting fired for being late too many times. Instead, he offered me assistant manager, said I'd shown up consistently for a year, and helped customers better than anyone else on staff. The raise was $3 more per hour, enough that I could afford a better apartment and maybe save money instead of living paycheck to paycheck. I said yes, and Frank shook my hand, told me I'd earned it through reliability and growth, words nobody had ever used to describe me before. I called Rose from my lunch break and she actually squealed, said we should celebrate by apartment hunting that weekend. We spent Saturday looking at places, and I signed a lease on a 1-bedroom with actual windows that let in light and a kitchen with a full stove instead of a hot plate. Rose helped me move the following weekend, and we painted the walls a soft blue that felt calm instead of the dingy white of my old studio. We talked about everything except Gloria, while we rolled paint onto walls, and I felt like maybe I was building something that belonged to me, instead of existing in spaces other people allowed me to occupy. Rose brought over a small table and 2 chairs from her garage, said every home needed a place to eat meals with other people, and I thought about all those years eating alone at Gloria's separate table. My new apartment was mine, paid for with money I earned, decorated how I wanted, and nobody could take it away or tell me I didn't deserve it. On what would have been Lucy's birthday, I drove to the cemetery where Rose had bought a family plot. There was no body to bury since Lucy never existed, but Rose thought we needed a place to acknowledge the pain that had shaped everyone. The stone was simple gray granite with Lucy's name and the dates she would have lived, and I stood there with my 6-fingered hand resting on the cold surface. I thought about the sister I never had, the one Gloria loved more than me despite her never taking a single breath, and how that absence had filled my entire childhood with shame and isolation. I thought about Gloria in her group home making clay bowls and believing I was Lucy finally returned, living in a delusion I'd helped create through my revenge. I thought about the haunting and Amy's face when she asked if Gloria really deserved what we did, and how I still didn't have a clean answer to that question. Janet said healing wasn't about being completely fixed or erasing what happened, just about learning to carry the weight without letting it crush you into someone you didn't want to be. I wasn't healed and probably never would be, not completely. But I was learning to exist in the world as myself instead of as Gloria's monster or Lucy's murderer. Life wasn't fair or neat, and I'd done things I couldn't undo to someone who'd done worse things to me first, and somehow I had to live with all of it. I placed flowers on Lucy's stone, yellow roses because they seemed right somehow, and drove back to my apartment where the walls were blue, and the table had 2 chairs, and nobody called me a parasite. It wasn't redemption or justice or even peace, but it was mine, and that had to be enough.